Revivals, huh? Sometimes they work and sometimes, well, let's just say they don't. But today we're diving into one that, well, it hit a bit of a snag, Frasier. Paramount Plus canceled it.
After just 2 seasons.
Yeah, 2 seasons, and fans are wondering what went wrong, what's going to happen next, all that good stuff.
That's a really interesting situation.
It is.
You've got this article from Radio Times.
Yeah.
And it seems like, well, there's more to this story than just calling it quits, you know?
Definitely. Because even though Paramount Plus said goodbye, it doesn't necessarily mean Frasier is gone for good. CBS Studios, they're the ones who make the show. They're saying they're going to try to shop it around, see if anyone else wants it.
So basically they're going to pitch it to some other networks or streaming platforms, hoping someone will pick it up, give it a new home.
Exactly. Happens all the time when a show maybe doesn't do as well as they hoped.
Yeah, but it makes you wonder, what were those expectations? And why didn't Frasier meet them?
Right. Well, there's been some talk. Deadline is reporting that Frasier just didn't perform the way Paramount Plus wanted it to. But before we get too far into that, let's make sure everyone's on the same page. In the revival, Frasier Crane, everyone's favorite radio psychiatrist, he's back. But this time he's not in Seattle.
No Seattle.
Nope, he traded the skyline for Boston. And instead of figuring out his relationship with his dad, he's dealing with the whole fatherhood thing himself. His son, Freddie, is all grown up now.
Interesting. So it's like they took that father-son thing from the original and kind of flipped it.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think, focusing on Frasier as a dad instead of a son changes the show fundamentally?
It's a great question. It definitely adds a new layer to him, but I want to hear what you think about that later. And speaking of familiar faces, this revival had a whole lot of nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
Lilith, Roz, Bulldog, even Bebe Glazer popped up.
Wow.
It was a real treat for, the longtime fans.
I bet. Those cameos must have been a total strategy to pull those fans back in.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, is nostalgia really enough? Can it really carry a whole revival? Especially with how much is out there these days. I mean, rebooting a show that ran for 11 seasons, a show as iconic as Frasier, that's got to be tough. The showrunners even said that the first season was all about finding their footing.
Yeah, I remember reading that in the Hollywood Reporter. They said season 2 is where they were going to really dig deep. So do you think admitting they were still finding their feet, maybe that hints at why it didn't totally work on Paramount Plus pick?
It's possible, yeah. Revivals, they need to bring in those old fans, but also grab a new audience.
Right.
And that might mean, well, taking some chances, trying new things, finding a way to, make the old stuff feel new again. And maybe that just took a little longer than Paramount Plus wanted.
Maybe, but then you think, maybe another platform, maybe that's the answer. What if Frasier went somewhere else?
Yeah.
A streaming service that's, a better fit for the show's style and what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
Then maybe those deeper storylines, the ones the showrunners talked about, maybe they'd actually happen.
Yeah, it's possible. It's happened before. Shows getting canceled and then bam, another network or streaming service picks them up and they do great.
A second chance, right. A do-over to really get it right and find the right people to watch it.
Yeah, like a fresh start.
You mentioned the critics earlier. Do you think what they said, the reviews and stuff, do you think that mattered to Paramount Plus dear?
It's hard to say for sure, but the critics definitely, they shape how people see a show. And not everyone loved the new Frasier.
Right.
Some people said it wasn't as funny as the old one or as smart. And some people wondered if it was even a good idea to bring Frasier back in the first place. It's
funny how people can have such different opinions, right? Like some people, they just want that familiar feeling, those characters they know. And then others, they want something totally new.
Exactly. And that's the tough part for revivals, isn't it? Honoring the original, but also doing something new. It really makes you think, what makes a reboot actually good? Is it just doing the same thing again, or is it like changing things up to fit with how things are now?
It's got to be both, don't you think? You got to have some of that old magic, the things that made the original so great, but then you also got to bring something new. The original Frasier, it was a big deal back then, It did things differently. It talked about real stuff, but in a funny way. And it wasn't afraid to break the rules.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't just your typical sitcom. It really got into relationships and what it means to connect with people in a way that felt real and also smart.
It makes you wonder what Frasier himself would say about all of this. Would he be all bummed out, sipping his sherry and talking about how the TV industry is so fickle? Or would he put on his therapist hat and start analyzing the whole thing, with that Frasier wit?
I think probably both.
Yeah.
He was always a character who, well, he could be sensitive, but he was also tough. So he wouldn't ignore the bad stuff, but he'd also find a way to see it as a positive thing, like a lesson or a chance to, I don't know, maybe even grow and reinvent himself.
So true. He always found a way to, turn a bad thing into a good thing. Who knows, maybe this whole cancellation thing, maybe it'll lead to something even better down the road.
Could be. Things change so fast in TV. What seems like the end today could be, a brand new start tomorrow.
That's a nice thought.
It is. And it just shows you how powerful stories can be. Even if a show gets canceled, the characters and what they went through, they can stick with people.
And for Frasier, a character who is all about bouncing back and starting fresh, well, maybe this isn't goodbye. Maybe it's more like a see you later. So I guess that kind of brings us to, well, where are we? And maybe more importantly, where does this leave all of us? Whether you're like a super fan of Frasier or you're just interested in how Hollywood works, this whole thing, it shows how much power the audience has.
Yeah, for sure. These days, there's just so much to watch that it's the audience who decides what stays and what goes. The critics, they can help, but it's really the viewers who matter. They decide if a show connects, if it works, and if it's going to keep going.
And I think with Frasier, what we're seeing is even shows with a lot of history, shows that everyone loved, they're not safe. The decision to cancel, even a show like Frasier, it's complicated. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? Between what the creators want, what the audience wants, and of course the money part of it. It is a business after all.
True. But it's also a business that's driven by passion. The desire to tell stories that people care about, stories that connect with people. And sometimes those stories, well, they take some unexpected turns.
Exactly. Maybe Frasier will find a new place to live, a platform that gets what it's all about, that mix of humor and heart. Or maybe this is it, the end of the road for our favorite radiotherapist.
But no matter what happens, all the talk about the revival, all the memories it brought up, the questions about bringing back a classic show, those are going to stick around.
Which leads to, I guess, one final question for you to think about. Can a revival ever really be as good as the original? What makes a reboot successful? What do you hope for with Frasier? Or maybe, what are you worried about?
Check out that Radio Times article we mentioned. It really gets into all the details of this whole situation. And while you're at it, let us know what you think. What's your take on all of this? What do you think is going to happen with Frasier?
Because, talking about the shows we love, the characters that feel like friends, the stories that, make us think about the world, those conversations, they're better when we share them.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We had a great time figuring this all out with you. Until next time, keep those remotes close and those minds open.